understand about the real cases of success and failure in startups, this is another serial entrepreneur who's going to be able to help you get there. Again, the language will be Portuguese. So thank you for joining us today and joining us on this mission, which you maybe did know, maybe didn't know you were a part of it. So globally, we're looking at creating 1 million jobs. And here in Brazil, we've got a mission to create 100,000 jobs in our network. So welcome to this mission. You are now a part owner of this as well. And without further ado, I'm really proud and really happy to have here today one of my favorite entrepreneurs in Brazil and across the world. I met this guy in 2013. It was an awesome experience to meet him. At the time, he had another startup, which was actually, it ended up being a different type of a success level for him. And then he started building Pipefy. Alessio started building Pipefy, which is now a giant phenomenon across the world. And we're going to discuss with Alessio all of the challenges and the opportunities that Pipefy represents. I like the company especially because of certain characteristics it has, where it is a company that helps build products for startups and other companies. It also builds products that can enable remote working. And I'm assuming based on the way that the company was set up, it has a lot of remote working characteristics in it. So let's talk with Alessio about that and find out more. Alessio, welcome, and thank you again for accepting our invitation today.
Yeah, thanks for the invite today, Nima. Do you want to kind of try turning on the video or anything similar?
Yeah, you know, Alessio, we're trying to do that. There seems to be an issue in the system where I can have my video on and it looks like yours is also blocked. Okay. Unfortunate as it is.
No.
Actually, yours is working. Perfect. Yeah, so there you go, guys. There's the beautiful face of Alessio Alionso, one of my favorite founders.
Yeah, so thanks for the invite today, Prasha. I'm sorry, Nima, I was chatting with Prasha, our CMO, that I was kind of doing our webinar, this webinar today, and I shared kind of, hey, how do you think I can be helpful to the teams? And I think we discussed about a few topics. First one, what are kind of, in my opinion, the main priorities founders should have now at the top of their list. Second, in terms of next phase, assuming those basic survival needs are respected, what to think in terms of next steps with this new reality, and for the last, how to keep motivating your team and adapt to work in this new remote world. Like we are proud to be a globally distributed company. We have 2 offices, one in Curitiba, Brazil, and one in San Francisco, but also actually almost the majority of our team now it's remote and globally distributed from several regions. So we already had kind of a remote first playbook for most of our day-to-day routine. So moving all the teams now and having to be forced to having everyone working from home for us was just a matter of making sure the other teams were having the same experience as well. And I definitely have a lot of lessons learned that I would love to share. What do you think about running the chat today about a kind of fireside chat with questions from the group? Or I imagine you already have a few questions on top of our mind.
Yeah, that's a great point, Alessio. So guys, if you're coming up with questions or doubts and you have any types of ideas you want to get discussed on the call here, write it into the Q&A. We're going to make sure to get those answered. And then in the meantime, Alessio, tell us a little bit about this from the start, how Pipefy was born, how you as an entrepreneur started to build a company that helps other companies. Because you're a serial founder and you found that as you found companies, you need tools that help you, right? That's from what I remember in the beginning.
I decided to create Pipefy because of being my customer shoes. I'm a manager almost kind of my whole career and started in consulting by helping companies in their turnaround process. I was part of the process excellence practice. And I help teams to streamline their execution by helping them identify their execution bottlenecks, improve quality of their execution, or kind of increase quality in general in terms of product quality, service delivery, and all those things. Then I left to create my first startup, which was a marketplace for local services, a company called Alessios, like you mentioned. 5 years later, I sold it to apontador.com, which was a huge competitor, much bigger than us. And there at Apontador, that's where I had the idea of Pipefy, because like I had several things to deploy. I got kind of the role of to be their COO. I got responsible for implementing the business model of my previous startup into their business model. And in order to do that, I had to change dozens of processes inside Apontador in terms of back office execution. And anything I needed, usually I had to open a ticket to the IT team. They would ask me between 2 and 4 weeks to be able to listen to my needs. Then usually they would ask me another $100,000 plus 6 months to be able to deploy the change I asked them, which was a nightmare. I started thinking like, why this journey of deploying a process and creating a workflow to guide execution of your team is so painful, and you need to spend so much money in order to get that done? Because technically this is not a complex solution. There are other much more complex things like e-commerce, where you can just sign up to Shopify and start selling in a matter of hours. And I really couldn't understand why in the process world, you usually need to invest so much in technology and have like IT skills to be able to streamline and create technology and processes to guide execution of your teams. So that's how the main idea of Pipefy was born. In the end, I wanted to create something that empowered me to be able to solve my problems without having to ask for the help from the IT department or other teams. And then that's how the idea came to reality, and that's how we started.
Wow, yeah, that's definitely a very natural way of starting a company, right? You feel a problem yourself, you see a ton of other people probably have this problem, and then you go after solving it. So tell us a little bit more about how the company was structured from day one, because we have here our main public here today, and everybody who's going to be watching the recording is probably looking at how do they build a company that's born global from day one. And you did a really good job in that. I mean, you're doing a fantastic job today too, but right off the start, it had that air of being a global company.
Yeah. First of all, like, imagine you're designing a given persona to your product, and you are doing your research, like moms that likes to search online for brand new stuff, to do handmade things, to be able to improve, I don't know, like to be able to design something to their kids or something like that. And in your niche, you want to attack women between 20 and 35 years old that consume that type of content online and are willing to buy to receive that content. If you act locally and you have like a geographical mindset, I can guarantee that this segment of customers, in terms of representativeness, it will be, it already will be really small. But if you look in your local geography, probably you're going to be talking about a few dozens of potential leads near you. When you think globally and you start to think about this persona, regardless its region, but just looking to behaviors and needs in terms of problems and willingness to buy, that group that it used to look like as a really small group of buyers, overnight becomes a huge group of people. In the past, it was really hard to target those customers, market to them, and sell, because we had to have physical infrastructure, salespeople, and you needed to have a local presence. But now, because of the digital channels and because most of the tech products now, they are fully 100% self-service, actually to target to customers with those type of profiles and execute a strategy to reach those customers globally, it's 100 times easier than reaching a bigger segment of customers locally in your city. So the big why of why I wanted to do that globally, it was really a personal commitment to create like a global and really competitive product. I committed myself to have kind of the best investors, the best team, and regardless the industry, I committed to create a product where the sales reps of my competitors would fear. Then when they hear we are on deals fighting with those competitors for customers, and basically that's it. I wanted to create a product that I would be proud of, and a product that's really competitive globally, especially on the bigger markets like US and Europe and so on. And that was my number one dream. And also, like I mentioned, after I realized that actually when you have a niche strategy, having a global distributed playbook is much, much easier than just doing that locally.
Interesting you say that. It's similar. I came to when in Silicon Valley was the first time I kind of heard, maybe about 10 years ago or so. It was, I forget if it was Mark Andreessen or somebody from, or Paul Graham, I think it was, who said, if you're going to build a company, if it's a hard one or an easy one, it's going to be just as difficult. If it's going to be a big company or a small company, it is going to be just as difficult. So you might as well try and figure out something that's got larger scalability to it and take that ambitious step forward. So like definitely what you're doing at Pipefy is freaking ambitious, right? Like it's been, like you said yourself, like if there's someone going against the company trying to sell a competitive product, which I can't really think of like what are really the direct competitors. And that's probably what makes people sweat when they see you go into like these markets, right? So Alessio, you told us about why going global was important and how you saw that vision. Can you tell us a little bit about like how you actually went after doing that? Like you have a Brazilian company with you know, it's got Brazilian roots and hearts, but it's got all of this global footprint. So how is it that you know, someone like yourself, with all of the challenges that a developing economy brings, let's not just look at Brazil, all other Latin American companies go through the same problem. So all these people are basically, all these founders are looking to build global companies, but they feel like they're coming from this like shorter or smaller advantage or less advantageous position being in a developing economy. So how did you overcome that and tell us all that, no, that's not true. You can build a massive global company from Curitiba, from Brazil? You know, what was it like tactically there?
Tactically, it's like starting a new diet from scratch. Like you always, you just can feel and have the bad side of that, and it takes a little bit of time to realize and start kind of reaping the benefits of having a good execution towards that objective. What's the most challenging thing first is that you need to understand that you need to be a true global company and not just a local based product with a translation to English. These are completely different things. If you are going global, you need to be global and international first. So all your product documentations, your capacity to translate your product, all your support content, your marketing campaigns, your sales teams, you should to be able to start selling from day one to global distributed customers. And this should be the company's highest priority and not just kind of a side project of someone just trying to translate the product here and there and figure out how it would perform in other markets. And from there, like there are like a few hacks. First, have like a synchronous playbook. If you have a live chat where you give support on the phone with customers, you need to be able to show up that you are professional, have a good English, that you have native speakers, people, and so on. But if you have an asynchronous approach to deal with those customers, like having a ticketing system that's asynchronous or forum, you even have time to go in Google Translate and spell check the content you are producing. You can review. I started Pipefy, and I wasn't like a good, a fluent speaker in English at that time. And I remember all the content we produced. I used to go to Fiverr, which is a marketplace where you pay $5 to get tasks done by people, and I hired proofreaders to just review my content and making sure that that content look like a content produced by a native US-based customer. And this type of workaround and hack is really, really effective when you are trying to create that global approach. In terms of channel and go to market, I would say that's much easier because then you can find some niche communities online, like Product Hunt or communities where your target customers, they go online to exchange ideas, lessons learned, and so on. And those customers usually they shared a lot of those best practices in those online channels, and you can start engaging with those communities remotely and start kind of having your first customers and start having early traction by using those digital channels.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thank you for that. You got me thinking now. You know, as a native speaker, as a Canadian living in Brazil, and then like trying to build companies globally from day one, I've been challenged. You know, even I've been challenged in the language barrier there. So tell us a little bit more about. You said you keep alluding to as you go global to the English language and to appealing to people who speak the English language. Why English? Why not Chinese? Why not Arabic? Why not French or Spanish?
Pareto curve. Like there's a Pareto principle that says that 20% of your actions generate 80% of the consequences. And English kind of the biggest market in the world. They are US native based and they speak English. And in all the other markets in the world, probably they speak their natural language and also as a kind of a second language, probably it's English. So it's just more effective. Produce content, marketing campaigns, produce support content, and have a sales team and a customer success team that's working outside your native language. It's already hard. If you're thinking about speaking more than a second language, it's get even more and more and more difficult to find talent, train people, translate all the content to different languages and everything. So I think that's the most effective approach.
So great point. So let's resume this point out so we all kind of understand. So first of all, if you're going to, as you're a startup and when you're tiny, you know, and believe it or not, Alessio and Pipefy were a tiny startup one day. So when you were tiny and you only had one process flow that you could attend to at each time, basically you had to choose one language or one form of communicating, and there was no way for you to attack English and Chinese and French and Spanish, which would be like the next ones in line. And basically because you'd probably not be here today if you started that way. So you started, the beachhead was the English language. It was the biggest market there. So you attacked that. So that's really interesting because a lot of times we find sort of this half-assed globalization way or half-assed global startup launch methods. And I see a lot of that in Brazil and other Latin American countries. And it kind of makes you wonder. So let's like hammer it down today. We've got here in front of us, we've got a successful Brazilian founder who built built a company that operates in multiple markets around the world and competes with the big leagues. And it's because he started the company as English first. So English first was something that was very important in this case. So we've got a question for you here, Alessio. Our Miguel Barreto graduated with us in Belo Horizonte in 2016, and he's recently become a director in Belo Horizonte, and most recently a Founder Institute Brazil director. So he's a regional director right now with us. He asks a question which is actually, I think, interesting as well. How was can you describe your go-to-market strategy in the early stage?
Our go-to-market in early stage, basically we had like two big things that worked really well. First, in terms of adoption curve, we kind of targeted in customers that were willing to adopt and test new technology, especially startups. That's why we kind of, we run campaigns on Product Hunt and all those things. Usually people from startups, they like trying new products and they are more open to solutions that are not fully ready in terms of product capabilities and stable if compared with big enterprise buyers. So I focus in that segment in the beginning. And also usually those companies, they are smaller, so it's easier to convince them to buy, different than a company that's huge and has procurement departments, legal, IT, security, and compliance. Like these are different worlds. So that's the first thing. And the second thing that worked for us really well, it was the process templates, because like most of our users at the beginning, they had to design from scratch their own processes. And usually it had like a lot of friction to let those customers understand how the tool works, be able to set up the tool to address their needs, and then play with it for a little bit and have the aha moment and to understand how the product works. And by implementing the templates, we reduce that journey drastically. And the templates help the users connect and understand for what they could use Pipefy for, and drastically reduce the amount of steps they had to do to be able to go live with our solution. And in terms of go to market, these are the two big things we did, because with the templates, then we start separating by department and we start going to market and attacking almost everyone in the company, because we had templates for the HR team, we had templates for the sales team, marketing, and so on.
Wow, that's really interesting. So your go-to-market strategy, it's a lesson to be had, because it not only involves what type of customer you went after at first, which was basically a strategy to obtain the customer with the lowest sales cycle and therefore lowest cost of acquisition, not necessarily largest lifetime value, but at least it helped you validate your product faster or invalidate some assumptions really quickly. And then on the other end, you had go-to-market strategy embedded into your product. So as you described right now, so embedded into the product can also be your go-to-market strategy, making it easier for people to start to use and give feedback.
Yeah, in our product, and the way we think about go-to-market, we have two worlds. Like we have one world where we think about land a brand new user, and it's my dog snoring here, okay? And after we land a brand new customer, it's an expand motion. And in the expand motion, we focus on making sure this customer will be successful. He'll use Pipefy more on other use cases. And then from there, he'll start spreading Pipefy to other teams inside his organization. So on the marketing side, on the land, we are really focused on just landing the first successful implementation. From there, usually those customers, they kind of adopt the product organically and start using more and more.
Okay, so you just reminded me of this awesome story, Alessio. Tell us about how you got into 500 startups. It had to do with that same strategy, didn't it?
More or less, yes. Actually, that's yes, because like I stalked all the partners at 500 startups that were decision makers in the process. And usually they were kind of successful entrepreneurs or people that usually they have kind of other businesses. So one partner, they had like a big ad agency. Another partner, they had like an e-commerce successful somewhere. The other person was Megan, which was the kind of the COO-ish of 500 startups. So I literally mapped all the decision makers of the 500 startups acceleration program, and I proactively emailed them offering and explaining how Pipefy could be helpful to their specific needs in their day-to-day business. And that helped a lot those decision makers to get aware of Pipefy and also connect the dots and understand what we could do for them in terms of solution. And after they kind of could connect the dots and understand, like, okay, I know a big ad agency, and that's how I can use Pipefy. It got much easier for the decision maker to translate the dots and understand our product capabilities and how competitive we could be when we decide to scale up and go to market. So that helped a lot. And then basically what I did this outbound approach. I also run a super niched campaign on Facebook. At that time, privacy, I think, wasn't an issue, and you could run really customized segmented campaigns. And I literally segmented kind of people that live in San Francisco, that work for 500 startups, that are between 25 and 45 years old, that also liked Dave Macker, and then got a sample with kind of the minimum amount of target audience that Facebook let you know. That's 1,000 people, which I knew were only the 500 startup partners and people that work there. Then I create like a display campaign on Facebook, and then I added the cost per click really high, kind of $1,000 per click, something like that, because I knew probably those guys, they wouldn't click anyway the campaign because they are really busy. And then I run the campaigns during the days where they were selecting most of startups, and it was funny because all of them like, man, like I thought we were kind of much bigger, already heard about you, like, and actually no, they were kind of getting impacted by a super target ad campaign.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. Wow, guys, take a lesson from that. That's go to market to the T. I mean, one of the best go to markets that I've seen for sure. You just made me jealous right now drinking some coconut water over there. I'm here in Toronto. We don't have that much of that. I mean, we've got a little bit in the fridge there, but not as much as we had in Brazil. So let's go to a question here. We've got a question that came in the chat. It's Daniela Lavado Borges is asking us, is the Brazilian market more difficult than other markets? Was it a more difficult to basically conquer the Brazilian market than other ones?
Good question. I don't think so. I think the markets, they tend to behave kind of the same. I wouldn't consider Brazil more difficult. People tend to think about kind of the Brazilian bureaucracy, blah, blah, blah. But man, it's hard for everyone. So that's not an excuse. The only thing in my market that in Brazil there's a difference is that cost of labor in Brazil, it's much cheaper than if compared with other more advanced markets like US and Europe. So while in Brazil, you can be inefficient because you have the luxury to be able to just kind of throw a lot of people in the execution. In more developed markets, the cost of labor is really high. And usually the average income is at least 3 times higher. And because of that, mostly companies based in US and Europe, they need to invest much more in technology to be able to make their employees more efficient. And because of that, their willingness to pay for software is higher, and they are less price sensitive. Brazil tends to behave more like India and other big markets, where usually their benefit to invest in technology, to invest in the productivity of their teams, it's more tight. They're not that open, or they don't value that much. That's the only big difference, I would say.
Interesting, because meanwhile we look at for the market of building companies, Brazil's lower cost of talent is basically an advantage. But when you're trying to sell software products to Brazilian companies, the ROI is just different. The ROI equation is different, and therefore it's a little bit maybe more challenging to offer optimization or efficiency products, right? And then would
And
you say that's like a multiple factor, or is it some percentage higher?
oh no, it's a multiple, definitely.
Wow,
Like
okay.
if you look in terms of total cost per employee, just looking by the regions and the offices we have, I would say that at, at like comparing someone based in Curitiba to someone based in San Francisco, the same professional just doing kind of exchange, tax differences, and average kind of cost of living, that person will have to make 3 times more. Uh, Plus, there's a competitive factor that makes things even worse on those more developed markets as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, because some of those developed markets, the wages are higher because of the competition in acquiring talents, right? So
Definitely.
that puts a little bit more pressure on that end. Yeah, that's wow. Thanks. That was actually something to ponder. So we've got a question coming here from Jan Carlo Magno. Jan is he entered into our Start Local Go Global semester last year, and hopefully he'll come back again this year. So he's got a good question here. He's saying, what were the toughest, and B, the best decisions you made so far in Pipefy, and what were your decision process to make these decisions? Tell us about how you made tough decisions, and then and what were the best decisions you made, and how those were made.
How I take tough
This is
decisions?
like the $1 trillion question, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like tough decisions are tough decisions, and they are tough to do anyway. What I would say is that people tend to avoid taking those tough decisions, and usually when they take the decision, uh, they should have taken the decision much earlier. And people tend to avoid those hard things sometimes for so long that compromise the capacity of the company to survive. Example, like you feel when things are not working, and you feel when your approach or when something it's not going towards the direction you want, because even you can be in the beginning of the project, but if you're not seeing early signs that you're going towards the right direction, usually are signs that you have the wrong map and you're trying to leave the jungle with a map that wouldn't get you anywhere. And being candor and transparent about that with yourself, uh, the faster you move, the better. That increase your odds to survive. The toughest decision I had to take, it's always one type of decision. It was the toughest ones kind of in the beginning, but it is understanding when it's time to let people go, especially people that are co-founders or people that are with you since the beginning. Usually, or things are not working and you need to be able to break that relationship. Do not be like in a personal relationship. Sometimes you know that that relationship, when you are with someone, it won't work in the near future, but you are in the comfort zone and you do not take the step to be able to let yourself free to be able to know someone else, you know. So with co-founders, when things are not working, I think is the first decision you need to take. But also, when things start to work and you start to grow, you're going to realize that there are like a few group of professionals that they are going to grow and develop themselves at the same pace of the company. But I would say that maybe 70% of the people that's with you from the founding team, they unfortunately won't be able to develop themselves fast enough. And you should be aware of that. And they should be aware of that. And having the decision to kind of let those professionals go because they are slowing down the growth of the company, I think it's one of the toughest things I had to do. Usually because they added their contribution and they were the right things. They were the right person and did the right things. But what brought you here, that's not what you bring you to the next level in terms of execution and what you are doing. And understanding that the transition happens, and even yourself, that your approach and the way you've been doing things probably in a startup that's growing will last for the best case 12 months. Like it's always really tough. The best decision I made in Pipefy, I would say, is it's be really aggressive. We are really aggressive in everything we do every day, and usually that always led us to be in a successful position, or it led us to always overperform, regardless if we're able to reach that aggressive goal or not.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, you know what? I always felt something about you, even when you were at Accesso Zero. If you remember, even then, I was like, oh man, this guy is like a real entrepreneur. It's because of that intensity that you had, right? And in like in entrepreneurship, you've got to be intense and you've got to be aggressive and you've got to be willing to take the hits that you're gonna take if you're aggressive and intense, right? So it's all a matter of like how much can you continue going forward while you are bulldozing your way forward. That's important. And it's really interesting you say that about the most difficult decisions. I mean, to some of us, it's more obvious than others that it always comes down to the team and people are the toughest decisions, the best decisions that we need to make. They usually have to do with that. Whereas we look at a lot of early stage founders, they don't have that notion. They don't understand that yet. So they understand that the tough decisions or decision making is an externalization thing. Like they look at, what like the customer or what type of product or who are, these external entities, mentors, advisors, investors. Whereas really it starts with yourself and then the team that you're building around yourself and how that evolves over time, right? So really interesting of you to say that. So tell us a bit more about how would you advise companies that are going to be starting in Brazil and other Latin American countries? So now, through Startup Mexico, we're also in Mexico. We're looking to go into other markets to develop this program. So this program here, movement for a new future. This is the movement where we're looking for startups that are weathering the storm in a different way. So they are showing anti-fragility today. B, they are probably offering products and services that work well remotely or for startups. And then C, they are already kind of setting up their work as more remote and less dependent on physical presence. So what would you give as sort of like a final, 5 minutes, 10 minutes here we've got as your words of wisdom to these founders who are starting these global companies from day one now, that who we want to have them continue to build their companies starting in their own country or their city, so we can create some jobs there as well.
I maybe what we're sharing, I think are I have two things in the top of my mind. The first one is the crisis is really bad. It is. It will badly impact our economy. It will. But if you split and start analyzing sector by sector or problem by problem, you start realizing that actually there are companies that are growing a lot in this crisis scenario. This is happening because the whole world got forced to adopt new behaviors. And with that forced adoption in terms of new behavior, people are taking decisions and are solving problems in a different way. And that's generated a spike in demand in different sectors. Just kind of by discussion I had with a few friends, like e-commerce is growing aggressively. Remote education, it's growing aggressive. Like I invested in a company and I just kind of, actually I'm the advisor of a company, that's not the one. I invested in another one that had the same thing too. They sell kind of WhatsApp solutions for sales reps and their demand grew by 3x. But this other company in the education, the same thing, kind of grew their demand by 2x. Delivery and so on. So if you separate those sectors and really dig deeper, you're gonna see that actually there's a huge growth in demand in those segments. And they're not growing marginally, they are growing by different levels of magnitude. Their market is amplifying by 2x, 3x, 4x. And those customers, they're gonna buy like crazy. And usually their bar to take decisions and analyze vendors is really low because they're growing fast. So they need to grow at any cost and probably they're gonna buy a lot of stuff. I think it's one opportunity. And at least that's what's working for us and that's what I could hear from other sectors. And I'm gonna give you one example. I have a friend that he owns a big kind of 1 billion plus yearly GMV. It's a huge marketplace for services, especially local services. And he had his top line number wiped out by 70%.
Wow.
His operations just kind of vanished overnight. He reviewed the segments and identified what were the segments that were growing in terms of demand. And he were not just able to offset the negative impact and get back on track in terms of what he was expecting to accomplish this year, but now he's adjusting his forecast just by serving professionals that didn't have an online operation before. And that's one example. The second big opportunity in my mind, and I think that's where that's one of some really good sweet spots, is really understand the impact of things that are really old problems and big problems. And usually the way to solve those problems, they will change because of this crisis. And that change will challenge the status quo and maybe will open an opportunity for brand new companies provide a different offer in the market. And I'm gonna give you one example. Usually when you think about enterprise software and setting to big companies, it means that you had to have a local sales force and those sales reps, they need to be on the plane, face-to-face meeting customers and building relationships and so on. And usually for those traditional enterprise softwares, it means that you have to structure a really expensive enterprise sales force that will be flying around globally sometimes or flying to Sao Paulo or other big regions. And that's what you had to do. But then you think because of this crisis, you don't have that possibility to face-to-face sell anymore. But those big companies, they are still buying. And usually those big companies that have had a previous experience, and in their mind, their way to buy was on shaking hands with people face to face and do stuff. Really big conservative customers are getting forced to do everything online. And those customers are starting to realize that actually solving their problem with this new way, it's much easier and faster than they've been doing their whole life. And just by having this change, you have some big companies like banks and really conservative buyers that they are stopping to have like expectations in terms of what they would want from a startup or what they would want from a sales team trying to sell them, and they're adopting new behaviors. And what used to be a strength from big company, that is have an expensive local sales force, it's not a strength anymore. And now those buyers, they're going to be served side by side from those enterprise buyers that usually are also trying to sell under a new environment, so they're not even used to that, against a small startup that maybe is globally distributed, selling to whatever from where. And I think this change in status quo about the buyer journey in really old school segments and things that have been around for years will create some window of opportunities to really agile small startups fill that gap faster than the incumbent competitors.
Wow. So that was a mountain of gold or diamond or whatever is your favorite treasure, guys. Alessio, that was incredible what you said there. So what we're seeing a lot happen in the Founder Institute network overall is that while some companies and founders are basically fixated on complaining about the fact that we're in a crisis and not able to basically get out of that mindset, we've got others who are growing dramatically faster than we expected them to. So we've got a few companies that are multiplying week per week, and that was something that we were just, it's the first time we're seeing that in our network, as most of our companies are less than 5 years old, right? So we had only a few that we're seeing now are just booming. So what we're noticing in some of those is when you do cohort analysis, is that who used to be a laggard, the user who used to be a laggard suddenly becomes an early adopter. Or sometimes the early adopters get pushed farther away. So the cost of acquisition and the lifetime value shifted drastically across the whole market, shifting the whole structure of the market, right? Is that what you guys are also seeing?
Yeah, I can see, because we have like a big customer base from several different sectors and industries. I can say that I can almost kind of see the same thing as well. Like we have like a few customers, and it's not about like the guy just got lucky to be in the right place in the right time. Sometimes you see competitors, and one competitor just fast adjusts their execution and are kind of surfing this new scenario, while the other ones are still complaining. I think it's kind of that whole thing about a few people see a glass half empty and the other half see the glass half full. Like so.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I'm actually kind of relieved because when times are good, a lot of people start new things, and a lot of those people are not actually prepared to take those things to the finish line. So when times are bad, at least those people who are not prepared to take things to the finish line, they step out of the way, and we can gather our resources and put them towards those who really deserve it, who are really working hard to build the future that we all want, right? So, Alessio, in this movement for a new future, I've got a question for you, as I've got for many other founders. You used to have a ton of people who worked together inside an office before, different places across the world, but they still work together in offices as well. Are you ever going to go back into those offices, or are you just going to keep the team fully remote?
We are really for serious. Our engineering team already gave that flexibility, So the vast majority of our team already was 65% of our engineering product team is remote. So just a small chunk they're based in our offices. And the ones that are in the office, it's not mandatory for them to work from the office. They work from the office because they like. The other teams in the company, like sales, CS, finance, and other back-office functions, after looking to kind of some data points, actually we realized our productivity increased. Well, I'm not surprised. I'm one of those ones that actually is producing much more now. So I think like we are going to maintain the office. It's already there, but definitely we will implement a much more flexible work policy around the flexibility you have to be able to work from home or not. Because I think that people will still miss kind of getting in the office and having some FaceTime, even for remote teams. If you are fully remote, you need to make sure that you have in your budgets investments separate to be able to make your team kind of group and have like some face-to-face time at least once a quarter or something like that, because it's like credits you add. Having those moments together and building those social bonds, it's kind of a car that you are feeding the tank and then you leave the offsite or that face-to-face work and people can work remotely really well. But from time to time, you need to fill that tank with gas again. And if you already had a practice for remote teams, for sure, people that usually work from the office, they're going to be willing to do the same kind of maybe from time to time, or maybe like we are really discussing with the team, like it's not mandatory to be in the office anymore, but at least kind of maybe twice a week, something like that. And that's exactly the things we're discussing right now, because definitely looking to the numbers, everything got so much better. We are just kind of evaluating to see if that productivity will keep high over time. That's why we are extending. Like we have no pressure at all to go back to the office, and we just kind of keep extending this experiment to everyone.
Wow. So guys, there we have it. We've had just over an hour here with Alessio Alionso, one of my favorite founders. I could listen to this guy for hours. I've already done that, right? I mean, I look forward to our next session in the Founder Institute program. I want to have you as our product mentor for sure. I mean, I remember the last time we had you in for product, we just wanted to stay longer and listen more. And, you know, Alessio went so in depth with it that all of us, you know, whether directors or mentors or founders in the program, we were all learning at such a rapid pace that it's always a pleasure to have this opportunity with great founders like yourself, Alessio. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire me and my whole network here, our whole network of founders in the Founder Institute and JUPTER, and now the United States Embassy and Consulates. So I'm hoping that we get everybody inspired from this, and that we can, you know, build more companies like Pipefy that start locally and go globally all across Latin America.
Yeah, like thanks for the invite, Nima. And just kind of wrapping up, I would like to drop kind of two advice that I heard that maybe can be helpful for you in the stage you are is do not expect to be easy, because if it's easy, it means that you are not aiming high enough.
Wow, that's it.
So, and the second thing related to aiming high enough, I think it's build a kind of a wild image in your mind. Imagine that kind of in 5 years from now, everything got wildly successful. And you everything went really well. The world, everything worked, and even more than I expected. How success will look like for you? And just kind of take a snapshot of that image in your mind and adopt that as the plan of your life. And every single day, sanity check to see if you are going towards your, and you are acting actually and taking decisions as your A version.
That's it. Wow. So those are,
Without your C or D plan, you know.
yeah. So guys, those are diamond level words. Those are platinum level words from one of the top entrepreneurs in our network. Thank you so much, Alessio. We're going to remember to think big, because thinking big and thinking small, they cost the same. And we're going to remember, we're going to build a visualization of the successful future that we want. And we're going to look at that every single day so that we check ourselves and our actions and behaviors, whether we're going towards that or not. Thank you so much, Alessio. Guys, remember to join us tomorrow again on the webinar that we've got, the 2 webinars we've got on the space tech in English, and then we've got the other one with Inche in Portuguese. And then join us again next week at this very same hour, where we interview yet another fantastic entrepreneur from our network in the Start Local, Go Global program. Thank you, Alessio. Thank you to everybody on the team. Thanks for everybody who's watching. And I look forward to hearing more feedbacks.
Bye-bye.